I'd like to know more clearly, what are we really talking about when we're talking about civil society? Because you've mentioned so many aspects that, in my limited theoretical understanding, seem to be a little bit contrary to the actual emergence of civil society in Western Europe in the 17th, 18th century.
I think one of the great things about this conference today is that's a question for the whole plenary to consider. And that I won't speak for where Alistair's at or where Harry's at, but to my mind, it is a huge opportunity to have some of that critical reflection. You'll recall, I really think one of the missing pieces in what's been happening so far is a lack of that critical reflection, a lack of that historical understanding of how we got here. And so it's for others to decide how broadly or how narrowly to focus the concept of civil society, and others who will be living and implementing this. But my I guess my twofold plea was, first of all, do make sure there's academic rigor tied to what you're doing and critical reflection, because that's missing in the developments elsewhere too. But then not to be constrained by that from the beginning, because frankly there's more than enough work for all of us to do.
I think one of the pieces that encourages me in the representation in the room is the incredible diversity of people here. Because one of the aspects that we have to come to terms with is the academic rigor associated with what we are trying to put in place. I want to be very clear. I am not an expert. I am not someone with that academic background, and therefore it's really important that we have this as an engagement that comes from the community, from the academics, from the students and the staff who are here, and isn't something that comes from the top down. In my view, that would be the antithesis of what I consider to be the development of civil society. And at one level, I can see that's a cop-out. You ask a direct question, so what exactly do you think should be in it? And I'm replying, you tell me. But I genuinely believe that's at the heart of what civil society should be. So I think it would be betraying those principles for us to say, and it should have these elements to it. I want to underscore that, perhaps not entirely appropriately, effectively, I was saying what Paul said so eloquently. Please don't waste time trying to define civil society. Get on and put in what you think are the important elements associated with it, and one of them has to be academic rigor. And that has to have historical context, it has to have the players that we believe are important.
I wonder if you could speak a little bit about what you think the role of open access to information or open education are in the realm of civil society.
Yeah, I mean, if I could make a small joke of it and say that I worked in book publishing and saw what was happening, so I got out of that business very quickly, and I hope that universities will have a better future than book publishing has had. It's incredibly exciting terrain right now. There are huge issues in front of the whole community about intellectual property, payment for intellectual property, use of intellectual property. But again, I encourage folks not to lose sight of the fact that what we're talking about is technology that now can reach more than half the planet. And it did that in less than 10 years. It took more than 300 years for the printing press to reach more than half the planet. So it is a period of phenomenal change. We don't have, I mean, frankly, I don't think society, civil society, government, universities have actually got a complete understanding of the impact of that change. And as we turn it into questions of civil society and social development, there is huge potential for open access, open knowledge pieces, but I think we're all struggling with. I'm dodging, but I'm going to turn to Alistair for a comment.
I think what's going on in the United States at the moment is a perfect example of the kind of huge challenge that we face, and we really must act and do something about in terms of trying to put constraint on what has become this amazing democratization of information. It's another area for me where somebody, and it needs to be the university, needs to stand up and say, stop. We've just put in place the most amazing shift in our access to information. You may not, you cannot, you should not put constraints on that, because that will absolutely fundamentally change the World Wide Web and access to information. So, I mean, here's a point where civil society should be rising up, and where we should be having a really strong message to the folks. I don't think anybody has seen the absolutely dreadful advertisements on American television to get them to get people to support the legislation that is currently before Senate. It's unbelievable that people would suggest that you should suppress information. I mean, it absolutely takes us back to times that anyone with a right mind would say were times of oppression, and we are facing some real challenges. So, again, for me, we are right at the point where we must have a more intentional approach to civil society, because we would respond quicker to this kind of challenge.
As you're speaking, I'm flashing back to a meeting I had almost 10 years ago now with Susan Whalen, who was then the minister responsible for CETA, and the community was really advancing the concept of civil society. She would have no truck or trade with it. She said, look, we are all civil society. What about the business sector? What about other elements of society? So it's a good reminder that my instincts and my reflexes still do not intuitively include the business sector, but to say that, of course, it is an element, it is a dimension of both a resource and a challenge for us. That being said, looking at business innovation, social innovation, the opportunities of some of the lessons of the business schools and the study of business to contribute to new forms of civil society. If nothing else from Alistair's presentation, the pace of change is such that we've got to be flexible and adaptive. And again, I throughout my life I've resisted narrow structures and constraints. So again, for today, I encourage that question to be asked at the tables of election around discussion.
I think it's really important that we do in fact include business. There's another area of tension between the uncivil business and in fact the very civilized business practices that we need to be able to explore. And we have people who have ideological views about both ends of that spectrum. And where do you have the common ground that you can actually talk about what are the strong advantages of doing this and what are the challenges? And so we must include business. I think we've also got an obligation to think about how do we create a sustainable approach to civil society. And sustainable means something that is financially resourced, and that has all of the business applications and business mindset associated with it. So I think it has a really important place. As far as the School of Business here is concerned, very clearly the slant that we have in terms of management, in terms of sustainability and creating leaders for tomorrow, we are already in the position where I think the College of Management and Economics here is a living partner for being part of the School for Civil Society. We must make sure that it's there.